You don't have to shout to make history. Barack Obama proved that again, with one simple moment that showed the difference between confidence and wisdom. The stage was glowing under perfect studio lights, the kind that made everything look crisp, flawless and calm on camera. Rows of seats were filled with people leaning forward, waiting, whispering, and wondering how this debate was going to play out. There was a quiet buzz in the air, the kind that comes right before something big, something no one can quite predict. It wasn't just another political event. This one felt different. The host, a well-known moderator, sat right between the two guests for the evening. On his left, Barack Obama, former president known for his calm tone, steady eyes, and sharp intellect. On his right, Ivanka Trump, businesswoman, advisor, and daughter of the sitting president, known for her polished confidence and careful words. From the very beginning, the contrast was striking. Obama sat comfortably, one hand resting loosely on the table, the other lightly tapping a pen. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, like a man who'd already seen every kind of confrontation and no longer needed to prove anything. Ivanka, on the other hand, was poised and prepared. She smiled at the cameras, straightened her notes, and gave a quick, confident glance toward the audience. Her posture said one thing clearly: "I'm ready." The host began with small talk, polite introductions, quick handshakes, a few easy questions to warm things up. The atmosphere seemed relaxed, even friendly. The audience laughed softly at the light banter. For a few moments, it looked like it might just be a normal discussion between two influential figures. But under that polite surface, there was tension, invisible yet unmistakable. Both of them knew this wasn't just a discussion. This was a test of composure, intelligence, and control. The first few questions were predictable, about the economy, public leadership, and communication between government and citizens. Both answered smoothly. Obama spoke with his usual calm rhythm, explaining his points with stories and logic. Ivanka followed with rehearsed grace, countering with talking points that reflected her father's administration. Everything seemed balanced. Until the moderator asked a question that changed the temperature in the room. "Let's talk about leadership," he said. "What does it mean in today's world to be a true leader?" A simple question, yet it opened the door to something much deeper. Ivanka smiled as if she had been waiting for it. She began confidently, speaking about loyalty, commitment, and strength. She emphasized that strong leaders don't rely on the opinions of others. They make bold decisions and stay firm, even when the world disagrees. Her words were powerful, polished, and practiced. The crowd nodded, impressed by her poise. Obama watched quietly, listening carefully, not interrupting. He didn't react. Not a raised eyebrow, not a single movement. Just silence. Then Ivanka took a small pause and said something that changed the energy in the studio completely. With a polite smile and a slightly sharper tone, she added, "Some people are admired for their speeches. Others are respected for results. I'll let the audience decide which matters more." It was a light statement on the surface, but everyone knew what it meant. It was a jab, carefully wrapped in charm, a pointed reference to Obama's reputation for eloquence, hinting that words alone don't build achievements. The audience reacted with a quiet murmur, that kind of sound people make when they realize something just shifted. Obama didn't move. His face remained calm, almost too calm. For a few seconds it felt like time had slowed. Ivanka sat back slightly, satisfied, confident she had made her point. The host smiled awkwardly, sensing the tension but trying to keep things smooth. The air felt heavier now, no longer polite, but electric. Cameras zoomed in. Every blink, every breath was magnified. It's strange how silence can be louder than words. And in that silence, every person in the audience waited for Obama to reply. Would he fire back? Would he ignore it? No one knew, but one thing was certain. The calmness on his face wasn't weakness. It was strategy. He leaned forward slightly, his pen now still in his hand. He gave a small nod, like a man who just decided something important in his mind. And then he spoke softly, with that steady voice that could quiet a room instantly. His words didn't come rushed. They came measured, every syllable deliberate, every tone balanced. That was the moment the real debate began. Not between political talking points, not between ideologies, but between composure and provocation, between calm intelligence and sharp confidence. No one knew it yet, but in the next few minutes the polite discussion would turn into one of the most unforgettable exchanges of live television. A verbal match where one side fought with pressure and the other with patience, and as the cameras kept rolling, the calm before the storm was over. Something bigger, something far more powerful was about to unfold. The question about leadership still hung in the air, and Ivanka Trump leaned into the microphone with the kind of confidence that filled the room. Her eyes scanned the audience briefly before settling on Obama. She smiled, not a friendly smile, but the kind of smile that said, "I'm ready for this." She began slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Leadership," she said, "is not about pleasing everyone. It's about standing firm when everyone else doubts you." Her tone was sharp, deliberate. She spoke as if each word was a stone placed perfectly in a wall she was building between herself and the man sitting across from her. "Some people," she continued, "believe leadership means giving long speeches, inspiring people with big ideas, beautiful words, and promises of change. But real leadership," she paused just long enough for the silence to stretch, "real leadership means getting things done." The crowd stirred. A few clapped softly. A few smiled awkwardly. Everyone understood who she was referring to. Obama didn't react. He simply watched her, calm, unreadable, patient. That only seemed to push Ivanka further. She spoke about her father, about how bold leadership sometimes means ignoring criticism, standing up to doubters, and focusing on results. She painted a picture of a strong, fearless leader who didn't bend under pressure. Her words carried rhythm, confidence, but also something else, something sharper. Then she turned slightly toward Obama, just enough to make it personal. "Some leaders," she said, "are remembered for what they said, others for what they built. I think history knows which one matters more." The room shifted again. There it was, the jab, subtle but unmistakable. The moderator's eyes flickered between them. The audience leaned forward. The moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. For a few seconds, it felt like the world stopped. Obama didn't interrupt her. He didn't roll his eyes, didn't laugh, didn't even blink. He just sat there still, hands folded, that same quiet patience that unnerved his opponents throughout his career. Ivanka, thinking she had gained the upper hand, smiled politely and added, "I think we've had enough speeches about hope. It's time for action." The audience reacted again, some clapped, others stayed quiet. A few looked toward Obama, waiting for his reply, but he still said nothing. It was the silence that made it powerful, not the words. Every second that passed made people wonder, is he angry? Is he ignoring her? Or is he waiting for the perfect moment? And that wait was magnetic. Ivanka noticed the attention shifting toward him and tried to fill the silence with more words, talking about loyalty, family values, and strength. She sounded confident, but her sentences began to blend together. A rush of phrases meant to hold the floor a little longer. But the more she spoke, the more it became clear that she was overplaying her moment, because silence, in the right hands, speaks louder than anything. When she finally stopped, the room felt different, charged, expectant. You could sense everyone's focus turning toward Obama. He slowly leaned forward, still calm, still quiet. His voice, when it came, was low, so low that people leaned in just to hear. "I understand what you're saying," he began. "Strength, loyalty, confidence, and they all matter. But here's the thing." He paused again, letting the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable. "Loyalty without truth," he said finally, "isn't loyalty. It's just fear in disguise." The words landed like thunder. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't gasp. They just sat there and are frozen, listening. Ivanka blinked, caught between wanting to respond and realizing there wasn't much she could say. Obama continued, still calm. "Leadership isn't just about being bold," he said. "It's about being honest, especially when honesty makes you uncomfortable." Ivanka shifted in her seat. Her perfect posture tightened. The power dynamic had changed, not with volume but with control, and that's when everyone understood. This wasn't going to be a shouting match. This was going to be a slow, deliberate unraveling, a lesson disguised as a conversation. Ivanka tried to laugh lightly, brushing it off. "Well, that's one way to look at it," she said, but her voice had lost that easy confidence. Obama just nodded, saying nothing more. The silence between them grew thicker, heavier. Every camera in the room was focused on that moment. The look, the pause, the unspoken message. Ivanka glanced at the moderator, searching for the next question, the next topic, anything to move on. But the audience wasn't ready to move on. They were locked in, waiting, watching. Because in that brief exchange, no shouting, no insults, no raised voices, something powerful had happened. The calm man had taken control of the storm, and the audience knew it. The silence stretched for a few seconds longer before the host finally spoke, his tone uneasy but professional. "Thank you," he said softly. "Let's continue." But the energy in the room had already changed. Ivanka had drawn first blood, but somehow she was the one bleeding and everyone could feel it. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No one spoke. The room was wrapped in a strange kind of silence, not empty but heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Obama's last line, "Loyalty without truth isn't loyalty. It's just fear in disguise," still hung in the air. You could feel it echoing, quietly challenging everything that had just been said. Ivanka shifted in her chair, trying to steady herself. The smile she wore moments earlier was still there, but faint now, unsure. She leaned toward the microphone, clearing her throat softly. "Well," she said, "I don't think loyalty and fear have anything to do with each other." Her words were calm, but her tone gave her away. It was the sound of someone trying not to lose balance on a tightrope. Obama didn't interrupt. He just watched her, steady, patient, composed. He had that expression he was famous for, the kind that said he'd already seen this moment coming. Ivanka continued, speaking about how leadership means standing by your beliefs, even when people doubt you. She said loyalty was about trust and unity, about believing in your vision no matter what others think. The audience nodded politely, but the energy had changed. Her words sounded practiced now, like lines from a well-rehearsed speech, and then Obama moved, just slightly, enough for everyone to notice. He leaned forward, resting his hands together on the table, his eyes fixed on her. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost too calm. "I think you're right about belief," he said softly. "But belief without reflection can be dangerous." Ivanka blinked, unsure how to respond. He continued, his tone steady, his pacing deliberate. "If you never question your beliefs, you stop growing. If you never question the people who lead you, you stop thinking. And when people stop thinking, that's when mistakes turn into habits." The audience was silent again. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words did the work. Ivanka tried to speak, but he went on, still calm, still measured. "It's easy to call loyalty a strength," he said. "But loyalty isn't about agreeing with someone all the time. It's about caring enough to tell them when they're wrong." That line hit hard. The air in the studio felt thicker, charged. Ivanka finally spoke, trying to sound composed. "Well, I believe in standing by the people you trust," she said. "That's what keeps a team strong." Obama nodded slightly as if agreeing, but his reply came like a quiet lightning strike. "True," he said. "But strength without reflection isn't strength, and it's just noise." The words landed like a pin dropping in an empty room. Every eye in the studio was on him now. The audience didn't clap, didn't cheer, they just listened. Because sometimes silence is the loudest reaction of all. Ivanka's confidence seemed to waver again. She looked at him, searching for something, a flaw, a weakness, anything she could turn back on him. But there was nothing. Obama sat there, calm and unbothered, as if every word he spoke came from a place too steady to be shaken. He leaned back, the faintest trace of a smile crossing his face. "Leadership," he said, "isn't about always being right. It's about knowing when you're wrong and having the courage to admit it." That line changed everything. The moderator, caught off guard, looked from one guest to the other, unsure whether to step in. But the moment was too powerful to interrupt. Ivanka took a breath, glanced at her notes, and tried again. "With all due respect, Mr. President, confidence isn't arrogance. Sometimes when you believe in something deeply, you don't have to question it." Obama nodded. "Confidence is good," he said, "until it becomes a cage. Then it stops protecting you and starts keeping you from learning." The audience stayed quiet, eyes glued to the stage. Even those who came in expecting a casual debate could feel they were witnessing something deeper. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about principle. Obama had turned the conversation into a mirror, one that forced his opponent and everyone watching to look closer at themselves. Ivanka tried to smile again, but the warmth had faded. She straightened her posture, folded her hands, and looked toward the moderator, hoping for the next question. But the moderator didn't move yet. The cameras stayed on the two of them, one calm, one trying not to show the cracks, and then, just before the host could speak, Obama added one final line, almost as an afterthought. Being right, he said, isn't about proving someone else wrong. It's about staying honest long enough to find the truth. And that was it. The audience didn't need applause. The message was clear. In less than a minute, Obama had shifted the entire debate, not with force, not with anger, but with quiet control. It wasn't a counterattack. It was precision. Ivanka looked at him, realizing that her earlier confidence had turned into the very thing he was describing: noise. And there, in that quiet studio, everyone watching knew exactly what they had just seen. The power of composure beating the pressure of pride. The host finally cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Let's take our next question," he said softly. But as the discussion moved forward, the atmosphere never fully recovered. Because once a moment like that happens, once the balance shifts, everyone can feel it. And in that instant, Barack Obama wasn't just answering a question. He was teaching a masterclass in calm power, one sentence at a time. The air inside the studio no longer felt calm. It felt heavy, as if every light, every lens, and every pair of eyes were focused on a single question that hadn't even been asked yet. Ivanka Trump sat still, her posture perfect, but something behind her expression had changed. The certainty she carried into the debate had started to bend. She adjusted her papers, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and smiled. But it was the kind of smile that comes when someone is trying to keep control. Obama sat quietly, hands folded, his face unreadable. He had said only a few sentences, yet somehow those few had changed the entire rhythm of the conversation. The moderator tried to ease the tension. "Let's move on," he said, "to the subject of integrity and responsibility." But before Ivanka could speak, Obama turned to her with a calm nod. "Before we do," he said softly, "can I ask something?" His tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't challenging. It was curious, the kind of question that feels harmless until you realize it isn't. Ivanka hesitated for a split second, then said, "Of course." Obama leaned forward just enough to bridge the space between them. "When was the last time," he asked, "you told someone powerful in your life that they were wrong?" The audience froze. It was a simple question, but it hit like a quiet storm. Everyone knew exactly what he meant, even though he hadn't named anyone. Ivanka blinked, caught off guard. "Well," she began, "I think that depends on the situation. Leadership is about teamwork, about trusting people who—" Obama didn't interrupt. He just listened, letting the silence between her sentences grow longer each time. She tried again. "In leadership, disagreements happen, but when you share a vision—" Her words trailed off. It wasn't that she didn't have an answer. It was that she knew any answer she gave could be turned against her. The moderator looked uncomfortable but stayed quiet. The audience leaned forward, waiting, sensing that something real, not rehearsed, not polished, was about to surface. Ivanka smiled again, this time more tightly. "Every strong leader faces criticism," she said. "What matters is that they stay focused on the bigger picture." Obama's voice came back, low and even. "The bigger picture is only clear," he said, "when you let more than one person hold the brush." There was a small stir in the crowd, a ripple of quiet recognition. The metaphor landed perfectly. Ivanka nodded slowly, trying to look unaffected. "That's a nice line," she said. "But in the real world, leadership isn't that simple." Obama's reply came like a calm wave. "It's not simple," he said, "but that's exactly why humility matters. The moment you start thinking you can't be wrong, that's when you already are." The tension in the studio deepened. Even the moderator seemed to forget his next cue. Ivanka took a slow breath, trying to recover. "I think we can agree to disagree," she said lightly, but her voice trembled just enough to show that the ground beneath her confidence was cracking. Obama smiled politely. "That's fair," he said, "but disagreement only means something when both sides are listening." That single line drew a collective hush from the crowd. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the sound of truth landing exactly where it was meant to. Ivanka glanced at the moderator again, searching for an escape. The next question, the next topic, anything to shift the focus. But he was frozen too, unsure of whether to step in. She tried to fill the silence. "Well," she said, "I think it's easy to sit back and talk about listening when you're not the one making the hard choices." Obama looked at her and said quietly, "Listening is the hard choice." The words lingered like an echo no one could silence. Ivanka pressed her lips together, realizing there was no comeback that wouldn't sound defensive. For the first time that evening, she looked down at her notes instead of at the audience. 31 seconds passed. No one spoke. Those were the longest 31 seconds of the night. When the moderator finally cleared his throat, Ivanka quickly smiled again. Polite, professional, but clearly shaken. "Thank you," she said softly. "I think we've covered that topic." Obama nodded, still calm, still composed. The moderator turned to him. "Would you like to add anything?" Obama thought for a moment, then said, "Only this. Power is tested not when people agree with you, but when they don't. That's when you find out who's really leading." The words landed gently but firmly, and this time the audience couldn't stay silent. They didn't cheer loudly, but a soft wave of applause broke through, the kind that comes from people who recognize they've just heard something genuine. Ivanka sat back, her eyes fixed ahead, her hand still resting on the desk. She nodded politely, but everyone could see it. The poise was still there, but the confidence wasn't. The moment had changed everything. She had started the debate trying to challenge him. Now she was struggling just to keep her balance, and the man who said the least had somehow said it all. The debate was supposed to move on to lighter topics. The moderator tried, he really did, to steer it back to safer ground. But the room wasn't ready to let go of what just happened. Something had shifted. Everyone could feel it. The air carried a kind of quiet that didn't come from awkwardness, it came from respect. Even those who came in expecting a predictable exchange knew they had just witnessed something far more real than they had anticipated. Ivanka sat still, chin lifted, her expression composed. But her silence spoke louder than any defense she could have offered. For the first time that night, she didn't reach for the next talking point. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. Obama leaned back slightly, hands folded. His demeanor hadn't changed once the entire evening. It wasn't pride, it was control. That rare kind that doesn't come from needing to win, but from knowing exactly who you are even when challenged. The moderator hesitated, then asked softly, "Mr. President, if you could leave the audience with one thought tonight, what would it be?" Obama took a moment before answering. He looked out toward the audience, eyes steady, and said, "Truth doesn't need a microphone to be heard. It just needs time." The words rolled across the room like a quiet wave. No one dared to speak over them. He continued, his voice steady but warm. "You can shout over people, you can talk faster, you can interrupt, but none of that changes the truth. It waits, it always does. The question is whether we're patient enough to hear it." The audience leaned in, listening, not just because it was Barack Obama speaking, but because it was something everyone could feel was real. Ivanka nodded slightly, her expression unreadable, but her posture had softened. She wasn't the sharp challenger anymore. She looked thoughtful, almost reflective. Obama added, "Power without reflection eventually collapses on itself. But humility builds things that last." There was no anger in his words, no hint of mockery, just a calm sincerity that carried more strength than any raised voice could. The moderator finally found his voice again. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That's beautifully said." The audience applauded, but it wasn't the usual applause that fills a debate stage. It was slower, more deliberate, an applause that said, "We understood." Ivanka glanced his way once more. Her eyes didn't carry defiance now. They carried thought. She leaned toward her microphone and said softly, "I think that's something we can all agree on." For a moment, it was as if the tension that had filled the room melted into something else, understanding. Obama nodded slightly, offering a small smile. "That's the start of progress," he said. "Agreement isn't the goal. Understanding is." The moderator smiled, relieved to feel the room breathe again. "On that note," he said, "I think we can call that a wrap." The cameras were still rolling. But everyone knew the real moment had already happened minutes earlier, the one where words stopped being just part of a debate and became something far more meaningful. As the discussion ended, Ivanka reached out to shake Obama's hand. He accepted calmly and respectfully. It was brief, but it carried weight. Two people on opposite sides of ideas, but still bound by something older than politics. Simple human decency. As the applause continued, the camera lingered on Obama for a few seconds longer. He didn't bask in it. He didn't look triumphant. He just nodded politely to the crowd, then turned toward the moderator, thanking him quietly. The moment didn't end with fireworks. It ended with silence, the kind that means something has been said that doesn't need repeating. Outside the studio, later that night, clips of the exchange would be shared, replayed and discussed everywhere. But for those who were in the room, there was a single takeaway that couldn't be captured in sound bites. Real strength isn't loud, it's composed. Obama hadn't won by force. He hadn't raised his voice or cornered his opponent. He had done something far rarer. He had made the room pause, think, and reflect. And Ivanka, though shaken in the moment, had been part of that too. Because without challenge, there's no lesson. Without opposition, there's no reflection. That's why when the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped, no one left talking about who destroyed whom. They talked about how it happened, how calm can disarm chaos, how respect can turn conflict into clarity. Obama's closing words seemed to follow everyone out the door that night. Truth doesn't need a microphone to be heard. It just needs time. Those words echoed quietly, carried in minds and conversations long after the show ended. And somewhere in that stillness was the unspoken truth of the night. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to speak louder, but to speak last with purpose and peace. And that, more than any argument or applause, was the real victory.